I used to see her at the coffee shop down the street before I knew she was my roommate's sister. The kind of place where the milk steams too loud and the clock over the counter always runs 5 minutes slow. She'd sit by the window with a book half open, though she never really seemed to read. She'd glance up when the doorbell chimed, eyes pausing on people the way you pause at a painting you don't understand but don't want to walk past too quickly. The first time we spoke, it wasn't much. She noticed I always ordered the same thing. Americano, no sugar, right? She said, almost absent-mindedly, as if she were commenting on the weather. I nodded, too quickly. Yeah. Guess I'm boring like that. She gave this small, crooked smile. Or just reliable. That smile stuck with me longer than it should have. When I found out she was Claire, my roommate's sister, it felt oddly staged, like the universe had recycled its extras. She was around the apartment sometimes, dropping off something for her brother, or staying the night when she didn't feel like driving back across the city. She was in her mid-40s. That was the first fact. The second was that she carried herself like she had already survived things no one ever asked her about. I pretended not to notice her much, but I did. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking. The way her hand lingered over the kettle as if measuring silence instead of water. She noticed things, too. One evening, when I came home later than usual, she looked up from the couch and asked, "Rough day?" I shrugged, kicked my shoes off. Not really rough. Just long. She tilted her head. Long is rough if you're 22. I laughed at that, but not out loud. More like it caught in my throat and stayed there. Loneliness doesn't announce itself. It just builds small routines. For me, it was typing out texts I'd never send. Things like, "Want to grab coffee?" or "You still up?" I'd write them and then delete, telling myself it was better to wait for another time. Another excuse. Sometimes, when the apartment was quiet, I'd sit at the table and fold a napkin in half, then in half again. Then unfold it. Then fold it again. Just something to do with my hands while I thought about nothing in particular, except it was never really nothing. Her laughter carried through the walls when she called her friends. Her footsteps creaked faintly in the hallway at night. These weren't loud things, but they filled spaces I hadn't realized were empty. The moment everything shifted was stupidly ordinary. I'd just finished brushing my teeth, the mirror fogged from the shower. My phone buzzed on the counter. I dried my hands, expecting some useless notification. It wasn't. It was her. Claire. A simple text, "Come upstairs, but don't knock." I stared at it longer than I should have, as if the letters might rearrange themselves into something else. I could hear my own breathing, louder than the hum of the fridge down the hall. My hands didn't know what to do, thumb hovering, screen glowing, pulse in my wrist too fast for such a small moment. The apartment was silent except for the ticking clock in the living room. The same clock that always ran 5 minutes slow. I stood there, phone still lit in my hand, and thought, whatever happens when I climb those stairs, nothing will be the same again. The stairs creaked under my weight like they wanted to give me away. I kept my steps slow, as if rushing would make me seem younger than I was. Maybe it already did. Her door was half open. Not wide, not welcoming, but cracked just enough to show light spilling across the hallway carpet. I pushed gently, and there she was, Claire, sitting cross-legged on the floor with a blanket draped over her shoulders, a mug of tea warming her hands. "Couldn't sleep," she said, without looking at me. Then she nodded at the other mug waiting beside her. "Made extra." I sat opposite her, knees almost brushing hers. The steam curled between us, carrying the faint smell of chamomile. I noticed the lines at the corners of her eyes when she finally glanced up, not flaws, but markers, like tree rings telling you where time had passed. We didn't talk at first. Just sipped, the only sound the faint tapping of rain against the window. She broke the silence. "When I was your age, I thought I'd be somewhere completely different by now." Her voice was steady, but she gripped the mug tighter than she needed to. "Where?" I asked. She gave a quiet laugh. Anywhere else? Paris. Maybe married to someone who remembered anniversaries. Definitely not here, sitting on the floor with my brother's roommate. Her eyes flicked up after she said it, testing me. I swallowed, unsure if I was supposed to laugh. You make it sound like a bad thing, I said, too softly. Her mouth curved, not into a smile exactly, but something close. That was the risk, I knew it without her saying. She wasn't just older. She was tethered to my life in a way that couldn't be untangled without someone noticing. My roommate's sister. Mid-40s. Divorced, though I only knew that because of a story her brother once told with too much beer in his hand. I imagined his face if he knew I was sitting here, knees almost touching hers, watching the steam rise between us like a secret signal. My chest felt tight. Not with panic, but with something harder to name. She shifted the blanket, letting it fall loosely around her shoulders. The fabric brushed my arm when she leaned forward to set her empty mug down. The touch was nothing. Accidental. Yet my body reacted like it was everything. You're quiet tonight, she said. I shrugged. I don't know what to say. Then don't, she answered simply, folding her hands in her lap. We sat like that. No words, just the hum of rain and the faint ticking of the clock downstairs, always 5 minutes behind. At some point, she looked at me directly, holding my gaze longer than anyone usually does. Not searching. Just seeing. I don't know why that moment stayed with me, maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. And then she reached forward, almost absent-mindedly, brushing her thumb across the back of my hand as if she were smoothing out a wrinkle that wasn't there. The next evening, things shifted. Not by much. Just enough to notice. She wasn't in the living room when I came home. Usually, if Claire stayed the night, there'd be signs, a half-read book on the armrest, her shoes by the door. This time, nothing. I almost felt relieved. And then disappointed that I was relieved. It wasn't until late that I heard movement upstairs. Soft creaks, a drawer sliding shut. I debated for too long whether to go up. Instead, I stayed in the kitchen, aimlessly rinsing a clean glass just to keep my hands busy. Then the door opened. My roommate walked in. Hey, he muttered, heading straight for the fridge. He glanced at me, then at the empty counter. Seen Claire? Thought she was around. I shook my head, too quickly. Haven't really noticed. He nodded, distracted, but the words stuck like something caught between my teeth. Haven't noticed. A lie so thin it felt transparent. Later, when the apartment quieted again, she came down the stairs barefoot. Hair tied back, wearing an oversized sweater that looked borrowed from years ago. She stopped when she saw me still at the table. Couldn't sleep, she asked. Same as you, I said. Her lips pressed together, almost a smile. Almost. She sat across from me, resting her arms on the table. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Just the hum of the fridge and the faint ticking clock. I wanted to say something. Anything. But the weight of my roommate's question hung in the air. If he'd noticed, how much longer until she noticed that he noticed? She must have sensed it. She leaned back, folding her arms. Distance. You don't have to keep me company, you know. I'm not, I started, then stopped. My hands tightened around the napkin I'd been folding. She tilted her head, watching me too carefully. You're young. You think sitting here means something it doesn't. The word stung, though her voice was soft. Not cruel. Just careful. I shook my head, but nothing came out. My throat worked around words I didn't trust myself to say. The silence stretched. Then she reached for my hand, halfway, then stopped, pulling back before she touched me. That almost touch burned more than any contact could have. She began, but didn't finish. Her eyes flicked toward the stairs, then back at me. I leaned forward before I realized it. Close enough to see the faint lines at the corner of her mouth, the way her breath caught just slightly. For a second, it felt like the air tilted. Like everything would collapse into one impossible, inevitable kiss. But she turned her head. Just enough. The moment broke. Her hand brushed mine on the table, light, fleeting, before she stood. "Good night," she whispered. And then she was gone, her footsteps fading up the stairs, leaving the air between us charged and unfinished. That we ended up outside that night, not because of any plan, but because the air in the apartment felt too crowded with unsaid things. She suggested a walk. Just down the block, where the streetlights buzzed faintly and the trees shifted with late summer wind. We didn't speak much. Our shoulders almost touched, then didn't. The distance between us was measured in inches, though it felt larger. She stopped at a small bench near the corner store, brushed off the seat with her hand before sitting. I joined her, staring at the uneven pavement, tracing cracks with my shoe. For a while, it was just the hum of traffic 2 streets away and the faint smell of fried food drifting from the store. She folded her hands in her lap, unclasped them, then folded them again. "Do you know why I asked you upstairs that night?" she said suddenly, her voice low. I turned toward her. "No," she exhaled slowly. "Neither do I. Or, maybe I do. I was lonely. That's the truth. Lonelier than I wanted to admit." The words landed heavier than I expected. My throat felt dry. I wanted to say me too, but it sounded too simple. Too young. She glanced at me then, eyes searching. "You think this is just attraction? Because it isn't. It's worse than that." "Worse?" I asked, my voice quieter than I meant. She looked down at her hands. "Because attraction fades. This," she shook her head, lips pressing together. "This stays. And it shouldn't." The silence after was unbearable. I clenched my fists against my knees, not sure if I was angry, relieved, or something else entirely. Then, without warning, she asked, "Have you told anyone?" Her eyes locked on mine, sharper now, almost afraid. "No," I said quickly. Too quickly. She studied my face for a long moment, like she could measure honesty in breaths. Finally, she looked away. "I'm divorced," she murmured, almost to herself. "You know that, don't you?" I nodded. "My ex used to, he never looked at me." "Not really." "Not like," she stopped, biting the inside of her cheek. I leaned closer before I knew it, words tumbling out, "I look at you." The quiet after that was unbearable. My heart beat so hard it drowned the noise of passing cars. She closed her eyes for a second, then opened them slowly, as if bracing herself. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "You shouldn't. But I do." Her hand twitched in her lap, like she almost reached for mine but held herself back. I could feel the pull, that invisible thread drawing us closer, thinner by the second. Our eyes met again, longer this time, neither of us blinking. The air tilted the way it had before, only heavier now, sharper. If I moved an inch, it would happen. If she leaned, even slightly, instead, she whispered, barely audible, "What are we doing?" And the question hung there, trembling between us, waiting for an answer neither of us was ready to give. Word count, 503. Do you want prompt 5, the irreversible moment to go into the kiss/intimacy path, hopeful, or the pull-away/confession too late path, devastating? You said, white heavy checkmark prompt 5, the twist, raising the stakes again, 500 words, writing prompt, introduce a twist or complication that delays resolution. Instructions, someone changes their behavior unexpectedly, she pulls away, he stops showing up. Reveal something that wasn't said, an ex, a child, emotional baggage. Let the character experience emotional whiplash, hope, confusion, withdrawal. Don't resolve the conflict. Instead, sit in the ambiguity. End with a message unsent, a door not knocked, or a seat left empty. Reflective pivot line, I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. ChatGPT said, here's prompt 5, introducing the complication, ambiguous, suspended, unresolved. Male POV, 500 words. The fifth part, the empty seat after the bench, I thought things would shift. Not explode, not break wide open, just tilt. Enough that maybe we'd stop circling whatever this was. But the next few days, she was gone. No shoes by the door. No kettle whistling upstairs. No faint music through the wall. At first I told myself it was nothing. She was busy. Out of town. But the silence stretched longer than it should have. Even my roommate noticed. Claire's been keeping to herself, he said one morning, shrugging. Guess she's back at her place for a while. He said it casually, like it didn't matter. But to me, it felt like the air had been taken out of the room. When she finally did come by, she was different. Not unkind, not distant exactly, just contained. She handed her brother a bag of groceries, made small talk, smiled at me briefly and then looked away. That smile was worse than no smile. Polite, practiced. Later that evening, when he was in his room, I caught her alone in the hallway. Hey, I said. She paused, one hand on the stair rail. Hey. Silence stretched. She didn't ask how I'd been. Didn't linger. Just started upstairs. I wanted to stop her. To ask what had changed. But my mouth wouldn't form the words. That night, I almost texted her. Did I do something? Deleted. We need to talk. Deleted. Deleted before I even finished the word. My phone screen glowed with nothing. Just blank space where a message should have been. A few days later, I overheard her brother on the phone. He was laughing, saying something about Claire's kid being back from a trip. Kid. The word caught me off guard. I hadn't known. Or maybe I had, buried somewhere in the half-stories I'd heard about her life before now. I tried to picture it, Claire as a mother. A teenager maybe, old enough to explain the tired way she looked sometimes, the way her gaze carried weight. It wasn't that the thought ruined anything. It just shifted it. Made everything feel heavier. The next time I saw her, she was leaving quickly, coat pulled tight around her. I almost called out, almost asked if she wanted company. My chest was full of questions, none of them safe to speak. She caught my eye as she passed. For half a second, I thought she might stop. Instead, she gave me a small nod, acknowledgement, nothing more, and kept walking. I stood there long after the door closed, staring at the empty space where she'd been. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. That night, I typed her name into my phone again. The message box blinked, waiting. Nothing was sent that IT happened in the kitchen, late. The apartment was asleep, my roommate gone for the weekend, the clock above the fridge ticking its usual 5 minutes slow. Claire was standing at the counter, pouring hot water into a mug. I hadn't expected her to be there. She hadn't expected me either. Couldn't sleep? I asked. She shook her head, not looking at me. Too much on my mind. I leaned against the doorframe, trying to ignore how my pulse sped up just being near her again. The silence stretched, full of all the things we hadn't said. Finally, I asked, did I do something? She froze for a second, then set the kettle down slowly. Her hands lingered on the handle. No, she said. Then softer, that's the problem. I moved to the table, sat down, fingers drumming against the wood. Then what is it? She exhaled. This shouldn't happen. You know that. I nodded. Yeah. I know. But I didn't move. Neither did she. Her shoulders dropped as if something inside her gave way. You're too young. And she stopped, shaking her head. I've already made all my mistakes. I don't want to make you part of them. I stared at my hands, folded tightly together. You're not a mistake. The words hung there, heavier than I intended. She finally turned to face me, arms crossed, like she needed to hold herself in place. Her eyes were tired but steady. Do you think about it? She asked quietly. About us? I laughed under my breath, nervous. Every day. Her lips pressed together, and for a second I thought she'd leave. But instead she walked over, pulled out the chair across from me, and sat down. Her hands rested on the table, fingers close to mine. Not touching, just close enough to feel the space between. I don't know how this ends, she admitted. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it falls apart the second we cross the line. Maybe, I said. Or maybe it doesn't. Her eyes flicked to mine, searching. I could feel it, the choice sitting between us, fragile, waiting. To risk it, or retreat. To speak, or stay silent. I leaned forward, heart pounding, and whispered, I don't care if it's wrong. I just don't want to pretend anymore. Her breath caught, just slightly. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again, looking straight at me. Then she reached out, finally, her hand sliding over mine. Her palm was warm, steady. We didn't kiss. We didn't say anything else. We just sat there, hand in hand, the hum of the fridge filling the silence. She gave the faintest smile, tired but real, and whispered, okay. And somehow, that was enough. It didn't change overnight. No sudden fireworks. No whispered vows. Just small shifts, barely noticeable if you weren't watching closely. She still came by less often than I wanted. I still caught myself hesitating before knocking on her door. But something had settled between us, the kind of peace that comes when you stop pretending not to feel what you already do. One Saturday, months later, we walked past the same bench where we'd once sat in silence, afraid to name what was happening. This time, she stopped, brushed the seat with her hand out of habit, and we both laughed at the memory. We sat anyway. The difference was simple, her hand found mine without thinking. No trembling. No pulling away. Just fingers lacing together like it had always been allowed. Morning routines changed, too. She drank tea, I still stuck with black coffee. But now we made them together. Sometimes she'd be at the counter before work, stirring sugar into her cup while I stood next to her, the smell of Americano filling the kitchen. She'd tease me, still reliable, and I'd smile into my mug. It wasn't perfect. We had to navigate looks from neighbors, the occasional awkward silence when her brother came around. But we built something anyway. Something that lasted. At 8:47 one morning, the clock above the fridge still 5 minutes slow, she caught me watching her as she read the paper. She looked up, gave me that small, crooked smile from the very first coffee shop day, and shook her head like I was impossible. I thought about all the pauses, all the almost confessions, the nights with folded napkins and unsent messages. All the ways silence had carried us until we were ready. And I realized, this wasn't the kind of love that crashed in loudly. It was the kind that stayed. She reached across the table, touched the back of my hand lightly, the same gesture that had once stopped my heart. This time, it steadied it. Okay, she asked. I nodded. Okay. And in that small, ordinary word, everything fit. I don't remember the exact moment it began. But I remember the silences, the tea, the 8:47 mornings. I remember how it felt to finally be seen, and to stay seen. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?